In this video, I'm going to take a look at the Sharks' schedule for the upcoming season that was just released, 2019, into the year, and I still can't believe I'm saying this, 2020. I know, it feels like it's still so far off in the future, but it's actually right around the corner. We now know how next season's going to start for San Jose, how that regular season's going to end for the Sharks. We also want to take a look at the longest road spans, the longest home stretches, also when San Jose faces the playoff teams that they saw last season. St. Louis, who won the Stanley Cup, Colorado Avalanche, who they saw in round 2, and Las Vegas, that's an interesting one, who they defeated in round 1. Also, we'll have a look at a couple different resting points for the Sharks, like when they get some sustained time off, when are the easier portions of the schedule in terms of demand. Maybe they regenerate, catch their breath, and kind of build on those down periods. I'll have a look at those, as well as some odds and ends, interesting dates, settings, opponents, and sequences for the Sharks next season. And so let's begin with the very first 2 games. How it starts for San Jose. Are you kidding me? A back-to-back with the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Game 1 in Nevada, Game 2 in California. This is obviously the rematch of Round 1 last season. Las Vegas had that 3-1 series lead. They went on to lose in Game 7, a contest where they were winning 3-0 with about 11 minutes left in that game. They took a 5-minute major penalty. You know how it all turned out. The Sharks scored 4 times there. They end up winning Game 7 in overtime, shocking the Golden Knights. And so, is this by accident? Not at all. This is the NHL stirring the pot, building the rivalry, and getting things going right out of the gate. I have no problem with this. In fact, I actually like it. I wish they would have stretched the Sharks and Golden Knights meetings over the course of the regular season, but instead, these 2 teams will actually meet 4 times before Christmas. They only face each other 4 times all season. They all happen before the Christmas break for San Jose and Las Vegas. So clearly, the NHL trying to strike on the rivalry while the iron is hot. The other thing I want to point out here in terms of how the schedule starts for San Jose is just the entire month of October. 13 total games, 9 of them are on the road, only 4 of them are at SAP Center for the Sharks. And I know what you're thinking, that might play out as a disadvantage. I'm here to tell you, I think it's the complete opposite. I've always found with the Sharks, who typically begin their seasons road heavy, this is a great bonding time and experience for the team and for the players. And yes, I do realize that a lot of them are returning, a lot of them are familiar with each other, but there's just something about separating all summer and even coming back for training camp. Not everybody is on the same page truly until the regular season starts and things definitely get underway. So it's nice to have these road trips, these business trips where everybody's pretty much solely focused on hockey, the team at hand, maybe a couple new players. It's just a good way for a group to get in a groove, to have some of this road bonding. So again, a very road-heavy schedule to begin for the Sharks. I actually think that's a pretty good thing. Now let's move into how the regular season is going to end for San Jose. And I don't mean record. Clearly, we don't know that yet. I'm just talking about the schedule. But it's set to be all divisional opponents, with the exception of one weird game against Dallas, really for the final 2 weeks of the schedule. I'm talking about March into April. And by the way, April 4th is the Sharks' last regular season game, number 82, against the Anaheim Ducks. But there really is a nice pace for this team and the schedule in the final 5 to 6 overall weeks of the regular season. They're playing essentially every other day. There's only one back-to-back in that span. There's no real apparent landmines for the Sharks in terms of difficulty of opponents or travel issues, and that's something you always want for this team, who hopefully will be poised and positioned well for the playoffs so that they have a nice platform to enter the second season. There's nothing that stands out as being difficult or abnormal about the schedule as it comes to the end. In terms of road sequences for the Sharks, there are a couple 4-game trips, but the longest times they'll be away from SAP Center include 2 5-game roadies. One of them is in October. It goes through Buffalo, then a back-to-back between Montreal and Toronto, then Ottawa and Boston. Hey, you know what? It's a difficult trip in terms of the teams and the travel, But at least it logistically all makes sense, right? Geographically speaking. There's also another one at the end of December and into January. The Sharks will be in Detroit, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Washington, and then St. Louis with no back-to-backs. So that's pretty good for a second 5-game road trip. I really tried to go through the schedule and find a nightmare sequence, right? Like an east to west to east to west to north to south type thing. Like maybe you go out to Florida and play the Panthers, and then you fly up north to Nashville and face the Preds, and then out west to face the Avs in Denver, and then back out east to Chicago to face the Hawks, and then back home. There was nothing like that. And typically each season has 1 or 2 trips that make little to no logistical sense. They're like, why would you even put the team through this? A team like the Sharks, who already typically travel among the most miles in all of the National Hockey League. But again, all of the trips, they seem to make geographical sense. Like Chicago to St. Louis to Dallas. Okay, I understand that. Or another trip goes Carolina to Tampa Bay to Florida to Nashville. Again, I tried to find things that couldn't make sense, trips that seemed like they were bad from the onset. There's really nothing like that this season, which is kind of surprising, and it's also kind of satisfying. And that brings us to some of the longest home stretches for the Sharks, 2019 into 2020. And let's begin with November of 2019. 15 total games. How about 11 of those on home ice? That is tremendous. Not just that, the furthest they travel in the month of November 2019, the furthest east they go, Arizona, to play the Desert Dogs. So they're basically spending all of their time in the month of November in the Pacific time zone. And then you follow that up with the month of December. This is unreal. 13 games in that month, 8 of those on home ice at SAP Center. And in fact, part of that means the Sharks will be home from December 12th all the way till December 30th, which also includes the Christmas break. The Sharks are off about 4 days surrounding Christmas as usual. Some of the players will travel home during that time, but the fact that they don't have to go anywhere outside of San Jose if they don't want to is a tremendous opportunity. So again, November and December is when you are going to see a lot of the Sharks in San Jose, minus a lot of the travel. I always find it interesting when the Sharks face playoff teams that they saw in the postseason prior. In this case, the defending Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. They'll meet San Jose on December 21st, as well as again January 7th. So those 2 games pretty close together, and then not again until March 13th. As for the Avs, the Sharks won't see them until 2020, including January 16th, March 8th, and March 17th. So again, 2 of those games pretty close in proximity. And as for the Las Vegas Golden Knights, as I mentioned before, 4 different times this season, all of them before Christmas, October 2nd, October 4th, November 21st, and December 22nd. So clearly the NHL knew what they were doing when they put those 2 teams and their games against each other together. I would never sit here and look at the schedule and tell you there are more difficult parts and easier parts, because we're all aware of the parity in the National Hockey League. There are no easy games. There are no for sure wins or losses on the schedule. Anything can happen generally on any given night. That being said, the one thing we can look to are potential resting spans for the Sharks. Like, when do they gain some momentum by not having to either travel a bunch or play a whole lot of games in a short span? October's pretty busy. November is pretty busy. December, there are some opportunities for rest, especially playing all those home games in a row, as well as the Christmas break. San Jose is going to have their biggest time off between January 19th through the 26th, and part of that is having the All-Star weekend. So again, in late January, that's going to be the biggest sustained time off for the Sharks, including the mandated league break, where the teams can't have any activity together. Also, there's another span in February from the 7th through the 13th, only 1 game in essentially that week's time. As well, we look forward to March and April. Those get back to more busier workloads for the Sharks. So, recapping, October, November, December, generally pretty busy. January, there's a pretty big stretch of rest. February, there's another opportunity for rest about halfway through. And then you get right back into ramping up March and April and hopefully getting into the second season and the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then lastly, just a couple of odds and ends to discuss. The Sharks only have 2 afternoon home games this season. Neither of them are actually on weekend dates. The first is November 29th. That's the day after Thanksgiving. They'll play the LA Kings at 1 p.m. at SAP Center. And then the other one is February 17th, MLK Day. The Sharks will host the Florida Panthers. That game with a puck drop also shortly after 1 p.m. How about back-to-backs? Those are always an interesting study when you take a look at the schedule. The month of October features 2 back-to-backs, 2 more back-to-backs in November, 3 separate back-to-back sequences in December, just 2 in January, only 1 in March. And when you consider all the games that'll be played in March, kind of amazing there's only 1 set of back-to-backs and no back-to-backs in April. And I also want to point out this. We will have a February 29th of 2020. That's right. The Sharks will play a game on February 29th against the Pittsburgh Penguins at 7:30. So kind of an odd scenario there. You don't get those every year. You only get them every 4 years, and the Sharks will be playing a game on that very rare date of February 29th. So that's a look at the Sharks schedule for next season. I'd love to know what you think about the team's potential, about what they're up against in the division, in the conference. It's way too early to start talking about potential playoff opponents, but how do you feel like the Sharks are shaping up in relation to personnel or the schedule? Put your comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you did, or subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that.